You stand in the flickering torchlight of a medieval castle's private chamber, the year uncertain, the air thick with the scent of beeswax and dread. The stone walls, cold and unyielding, seem to pulse with secrets, their shadows dancing like spectres of judgment. Before you, a young woman, perhaps a princess, perhaps a noblewoman, stands trembling, her breath misting in the chill as a group of matrons, their faces stern beneath starched veils, prepare to examine her. Her eyes, wide with fear, dart toward the heavy oak door as if escape were possible. The silence is broken only by the rustle of their robes and the clink of a silver basin. Tools of an ancient ritual poised to determine her worth, her honor, her very life. This is no mere medical procedure, but a trial by touch, a test of virginity that could crown her or condemn her. You clutch your cloak, heart pounding, sensing the weight of a tradition that has crushed countless women under the guise of purity. This is the world of royal virginity tests, a practice as old as monarchy itself, where a woman's body became a battleground for power, politics, and patriarchy. In courts from ancient Mesopotamia to Tudor England, a princess's chastity was not just a personal virtue, but a currency, a diplomatic seal, a sacred symbol of dynastic honor. You hear the whispers slither through the castle corridors. Is she pure? Is she worthy? These questions asked by kings, queens, and priests carried the power to elevate a woman to a throne or cast her into disgrace, or worse, to the scaffold. The tests, often invasive and humiliating, were rooted in a belief that a woman's virginity could be physically verified, her value measured by a hymen's presence or a midwife's word. But these rituals were never about truth. They were about control, a way to chain women to the altar of male ambition. Imagine yourself in this young woman's place, her heart racing as the matrons approach, their hands gloved in judgment. Perhaps she is a bride-to-be, promised to a foreign prince to seal an alliance, her purity the price of peace. Or perhaps she is a claimant to power, her chastity a shield against accusations of sin. You see her fingers twist the hem of her gown, her mind racing with stories of those who faced this trial before her, some exalted, others destroyed. The stakes are impossibly high. A failed test could mean exile, annulment, or execution, her body a canvas for the court's fears and desires. You feel the air grow heavier, the room closing in as the matrons begin their work, their murmurs a litany of scrutiny. This is not just a test of flesh, but a test of fate, where purity becomes a death sentence. The obsession with virginity stretches back to the dawn of civilization, woven into the fabric of royal courts across cultures. In ancient Egypt, pharaohs like Amenhotep III married their daughters to cement divine lineage, their purity a sacred mandate, though evidence of formal tests is scarce. In Rome, the Vestal virgins, priestesses of Vesta, faced brutal penalties, burial alive, for breaking their vows of chastity, their bodies inspected by pontiffs to ensure the gods' favor. You imagine a Vestal, her white robes trembling as she faces the high priest, her fate hanging on a ritual as arbitrary as it is cruel. By the Middle Ages, Europe's Christian courts elevated virginity to a divine virtue, tying it to Mary's Immaculate Conception. Queens and princesses like Isabella of Valois or Catherine of Aragon were expected to embody this ideal, their bodies subject to examination to prove their worth as royal brides. These tests were as varied as they were invasive. In some courts, midwives or physicians conducted physical examinations, probing for signs of virginity, often the hymen, a fragile membrane mythologized as proof of purity. You hear the clink of instruments, the whispered judgments, intact or tainted. In others, virginity was proven through public displays, like the showing of bloodied bedsheets after a royal wedding, a practice common in medieval France and Spain. Yet these rituals were flawed, steeped in superstition and bias. A hymen could be absent from birth or broken by innocent means. Bedsheets could be staged. You imagine the terror of a princess, her honor resting on such unreliable signs, her future dictated by the hands of strangers. The tests were less about science than spectacle, a theater of control that reinforced male power over female bodies. The psychological toll was immense. To be a royal woman was to live under a microscope, your virtue a public commodity, You envision a young princess, perhaps 16, her dreams of love overshadowed by the looming spectre of the test. "What if they find me wanting?" she might have whispered to her confidant, her voice trembling in the candlelit dark. The fear of failure was not just personal but political, threatening alliances, dowries, and dynasties. For some, like Joan of Arc, virginity was a shield, a claim to divine purity that justified her leadership. Yet even she faced scrutiny, her body examined to prove her visions were not demonic. For others, like Catherine Howard, the fifth wife of Henry VIII, accusations of impurity became a noose, her past dissected to justify her execution. You feel the weight of their stories, their courage and despair, as they navigated a world that demanded perfection, yet offered no mercy. The cultural roots of these tests lie in a paradox. Virginity was both sacred and suspect. In Christian Europe, it was a symbol of divine favor, yet women were seen as inherently tempting, their bodies a source of sin. You hear the sermons echo through cathedral halls. Woman is Eve, the bringer of ruin. This mindset justified the scrutiny, turning princesses into pawns in a game of power. In other cultures, similar beliefs held sway. In ancient India, royal brides faced rituals to prove their chastity, their purity tied to the honor of their clan. In imperial China, concubines were examined to ensure they were unblemished for the emperor, their bodies a reflection of cosmic order. You imagine these women, their faces pale, their hearts pounding, united across time by the same fear that their worth would be reduced to a single, fragile test. The consequences of failing a virginity test were dire. In medieval Europe, a princess deemed impure could lose her marriage contract, her family's honor, or her life. You see a young noblewoman, her eyes red with tears, banished to a convent as her betrothed turns away. In extreme cases, like that of Catherine Howard, accusations of unchastity led to the scaffold. Her youth no shield against Henry's wrath. Even passing the test offered no true safety. A woman's purity was a fleeting currency, easily questioned by rivals or shifting politics. You imagine the whispers in the court, "She passed, but can we trust her?" The tests were a trap, designed not to find truth, but to enforce control. A ritual that turned women's bodies into battlegrounds for power. This segment sets the stage for a journey through history's darkest corners, where virginity tests shaped the fates of princesses and queens. From Joan of Arc, whose claim to divine purity was tested to justify her mission, to Catherine Howard, whose alleged impurity sealed her doom, these stories reveal the cost of a world obsessed with chastity. You feel the chill of the castle chamber, the young woman's fate still hanging in the balance as the matrons deliver their verdict. Was she pure? Was she damned? The answer, matters less than the system that demanded it, a system that turned purity into a death sentence. As we delve deeper into this forgotten history, we'll uncover the rituals, the victims, and the truths buried beneath centuries of lies. If you're moved by these tales of courage and cruelty, hit that like button and subscribe to explore more hidden stories. Comment below. Where are you watching from? It's astonishing how these ancient rituals still echo in our world, reminding us of the price women paid for purity. Join us as we unravel the threads of this tragic tapestry, where the quest for virtue became a sentence of death. You stand in the scorching heat of a Mesopotamian temple, circa 2000 BCE, where the air shimmers with the scent of myrrh and the weight of divine expectation. The ziggurat looms above, its mud brick steps climbing toward a sky that feels alive with gods. Before you, a young woman, draped in linen dyed the color of dawn, kneels before a priestess, her breath shallow as she awaits judgment. Her eyes, dark with fear, flicker toward the altar, where offerings of barley and gold glint in the firelight. She is a Naditu, a sacred priestess, chosen to serve Inanna, goddess of love and war, and her virginity is the price of her sanctity. The priestess, her face etched with authority, murmurs incantations, her hands poised to confirm the girl's purity, a ritual that binds her to the divine, but chains her to mortal scrutiny. You clutch the edge of your robe, heart thudding, as the shadows of ancient traditions stretch across centuries, casting a long and deadly pall over women's lives. In the cradle of civilization, virginity was no mere personal virtue. It was a sacred contract, a a cornerstone of power and order. In ancient Mesopotamia, where city-states like Uruk and Babylon thrived, women of high status, priestesses, royal daughters, were vessels of divine will. Their chastity was believed to appease the gods, ensuring fertile harvests and victory in war. You imagine a Naditu, perhaps only 16, her life dictated by the temple's rules. Her virginity, inspected by priestesses through rituals lost to time, was her offering to Inanna, her body a bridge between earth and heaven. Failure to prove her purity could mean exile or death. Her fate sealed by a society that saw women as conduits of cosmic balance. The Sumerian Code of Ur-Nammu, one of the earliest law codes, hints at penalties for unchaste women, fines, banishment, or worse, though specifics of physical tests remain elusive in cuneiform records. Across the Nile, in ancient Egypt, virginity held a different but equally potent weight. You step into the golden halls of Thebes, 1500 BCE, where the air is thick with lotus perfume and the hum of sacred chants. Here, royal women, daughters of pharaohs like Amenhotep III, were often married to their brothers or fathers to preserve divine bloodlines. Their purity was less about physical tests than symbolic perfection, a reflection of Ma'at, the goddess of truth and order. You envision a princess, her coal-lined eyes wide as she prepares for her role as God's wife of Amun, a priestess queen whose chastity symbolized Egypt's harmony. No evidence confirms invasive examinations, but myths like Isis's purity suggest a cultural obsession with unsullied royal women. A failed expectation, real or perceived, could disrupt alliances or provoke divine wrath, her body a pawn in the pharaoh's game of power. In Rome, the stakes were even higher, the rituals more brutal. You find yourself in the Forum, 300 BCE, the sun glinting off marble as a Vestal virgin, her white robes pristine, walks toward the temple of Vesta. The Vestals, 6 women sworn to 30 years of chastity, were Rome's sacred guardians, their purity tied to the city's survival. You see a young Vestal, perhaps 18, her heart pounding as pontiffs scrutinize her behavior, their eyes searching for signs of impurity. If accused of breaking her vow, her body might be examined by matrons, though historical records like Livy's suggest such tests were rare and symbolic. Gossip or a lover's rumor often sufficed for condemnation. Failure meant a fate worse than death. Burial alive in a sealed chamber, her body offered to appease the gods. You hear the crowd's whispers. She betrayed Vesta. Rome will fall. The psychological terror is palpable. Her life a tightrope over a pit of divine judgment. These ancient practices were rooted in a universal fear. A woman's body, unchecked, could unravel the social order. In Mesopotamia, a Naditu's virginity ensured divine favor. In Egypt, a princess's purity preserved dynastic sanctity. In Rome, a Vestal's chastity protected the state. You imagine the weight on these women, their every move watched, their bodies public property. "I am no longer mine," a Naditu might have whispered to herself, her voice lost in the temple's hum, her dreams buried under duty. The tests, whether physical or symbolic, were less about truth than control, a way to bind women to roles defined by men and gods. In Sumerian texts, hymns praise chaste priestesses as untouched vessels. In Egyptian reliefs, royal brides are depicted as flawless. In Roman law, Vestals faced death for impurity. Yet these standards were arbitrary, the tests unreliable, shaped by superstition rather than science. The psychological toll was crushing. You envision a Vestal, her hands trembling as she tends Vesta's eternal flame, knowing a single rumor could end her life. "What if they doubt me?" she might have asked her sister Vestal, her voice barely audible over the crackle of the fire. The fear was not just of physical punishment, but of eternal shame, her name erased from Rome's glory. In Egypt, a princess faced similar dread, her purity a diplomatic seal. Failure could mean war or disgrace for her dynasty. In Mesopotamia, a Naditu's isolation in the temple, cut off from love or family, was its own kind of death. You feel their despair, their resilience, as they navigated a world that demanded perfection yet offered no mercy. These women were not just individuals but symbols, their bodies battlegrounds for divine and royal power. The spices of these ancient stories lie in their human cost. You imagine a Babylonian priestess, her face pale as she faces the priestess's verdict, her future hinging on a ritual as invasive as it is uncertain. "You are pure," the priestess might have declared, her voice cold, but the girl's relief is fleeting. Her life remains a cage. In Rome, a vestal's trial, as described by Plutarch, might draw crowds, their cheers or jeers a public spectacle of her shame. In Egypt, a princess's marriage to her brother, though culturally accepted, carried whispers of divine scrutiny, her purity a myth to uphold the pharaoh's godhood. These moments, though speculative, breathe life into dry records, making the past a mirror for our own struggles with judgment and control. The legacy of these ancient tests stretches forward, shaping the medieval and modern rituals we'll explore. From Mesopotamia's sacred priestesses to Rome's buried vestals, the obsession with virginity laid the groundwork for later tragedies. Women like Joan of Arc, whose purity was tested to prove her divine mission, or Catherine Howard, whose alleged impurity led to her execution. You stand in the temple's fading light, the Nadatu's fate sealed, and feel the weight of centuries. These tests were not just rituals but weapons, turning purity into a chain that bound women to the will of kings and gods. As we journey deeper into this history, we'll uncover how these ancient shadows darkened the lives of princesses and queens. Their stories are testament to the deadly cost of proving purity. You stand in the dimly lit chamber of a 14th century French castle, the year 1370, where the air is heavy with the scent of lavender and the tension of whispered judgments. The stone walls, draped in tapestries of saints and martyrs, seem to close in, their shadows flickering like the doubts that haunt the room. Before you, a young princess, barely 16, stands rigid, her breath catching as a group of matrons, noble women with stern faces and gloved hands, prepare to examine her. Her gown, embroidered with gold thread, trembles slightly as she clasps her hands, her eyes fixed on the floor, avoiding the gaze of the royal physician hovering nearby. This is no mere medical ritual, but a trial of purity, a virginity test to confirm her worth as a bride for a foreign prince. The outcome will seal her fate: a crown, a convent, or a scaffold. You grip the edge of your cloak, heart pounding. As the matrons begin their work, there murmurs a litany of scrutiny that echoes through the centuries. In medieval Europe, the obsession with virginity reached a fever pitch, transforming from ancient symbolic rituals into formalized, invasive examinations. The Christian Church, with its reverence for the Virgin Mary, elevated chastity to a divine mandate, casting women as both sacred vessels and potential sinners. For royal women, princesses, duchesses, queens-to-be, virginity was no longer a private virtue, but a public commodity, a prerequisite for marriage alliances that bound kingdoms. You imagine a young noblewoman, her heart racing as she's led to a chamber like this one, her body to be inspected to ensure her purity for a prince she's never met. The stakes were staggering. A failed test could annul a betrothal, disgrace a family, or spark diplomatic crises, turning a woman's body into a battleground for power and honor. These tests, often conducted by midwives or noble matrons, were rooted in a flawed understanding of anatomy, centered on the hymen, a membrane mythologized as the definitive marker of virginity. You hear the clink of silver instruments, the rustle of linen as the matrons probe, their faces impassive yet judgmental. Intact, they might declare, or tainted, their verdict based on superstition rather than science. Medical texts of the time, like those by Trotula of Salerno, offered vague guidance, claiming physical signs could confirm chastity. Yet even these were unreliable. Hymens could vary naturally or be absent entirely. You envision the princess's terror, her breath shallow as she endures the invasion, knowing her future hinges on an arbitrary sign. The ritual was less about truth than control, a way to enforce patriarchal standards under the guise of divine will. Beyond physical examinations, medieval courts employed public displays to prove virginity. In France and Spain, the showing of bloodied bedsheets after a royal wedding became a gruesome tradition. The linens paraded before courtiers as proof of consummation and prior chastity. You see a bride, her face flushed with shame, as nobles cheer over stained cloth. Her private moment turned into a spectacle. In England, such practices were less common, but the pressure on royal brides was no less intense. Chronicles, like those of Froissart, describe princesses like Isabella of Valois, married at 6 to Richard II, spared physical tests due to her youth, but scrutinized later for her fidelity. You feel the weight of their vulnerability, their bodies subject to the court's gaze, their honor a fragile thread in a tapestry of politics. The psychological toll was crushing. To be a royal woman was to live under constant suspicion, your virtue a public asset. You imagine a princess, her chamber lit only by a single candle, whispering to her confidant, "What if they find fault in me?" Her fear was not just of physical pain, but of eternal disgrace, her name blackened by a failed test. The Church's teachings, preached from pulpits across Christendom, cast women as temptresses, their purity a shield against sin. Sermons echoed with warnings. A woman's unchastity brings ruin to kingdoms. This mindset justified the tests, turning private bodies into public property. You hear the priest's voice in a cathedral, his words damning, "She must be pure, or God's wrath will fall." For royal women, the pressure was unrelenting. Their lives a tightrope walk over a pit of shame. The consequences of failing a virginity test were catastrophic. A princess deemed impure could lose her betrothal, her family's honor, or her freedom. You envision a young noblewoman, her eyes red with tears, banished to a convent as her intended prince turns away. Her dowry returned in disgrace. In extreme cases, accusations of unchastity led to execution, as courts equated impurity with treason. The Anjou court of 15th century France saw noblewomen like Agnes Sorel, mistress to Charles VII, face whispers of scandal, their virtue questioned to undermine their influence. You feel the chill of their isolation, their dreams crushed by a system that demanded perfection yet offered no mercy. Even passing the test was no guarantee of safety. A woman's purity was a fleeting currency, easily questioned by rivals or shifting alliances. The spices of these stories lie in their human drama. You imagine a princess in a Castilian court, 1400, her hands trembling as matrons deliver their verdict, her future hinging on their word. She is pure, they declare, but her relief is tinged with dread. She knows the court's eyes will never relent. In England, a young bride's wedding night, as described in chronicles, becomes a public ordeal, her bloodied sheets a trophy for her husband's allies. These moments, though partly speculative, breathe life into historical records, making the past a mirror for our own struggles with judgment and autonomy. The tests were not just rituals, but weapons, designed to control women's bodies and silence their voices, their outcomes shaping dynasties and destinies. These medieval mandates set the stage for later tragedies, where virginity tests became death sentences. You think of Joan of Arc, whose purity was examined to prove her divine mission, her body a symbol of France's salvation, yet a target for her enemies. Or Catherine Howard, whose alleged impurity led to her execution under Henry VIII, her past dissected to justify her doom. You stand in the castle chamber, the princess's fate sealed, and feel the weight of centuries bearing down. These tests were not about truth but power, a way to chain women to the will of kings and courts. Their stories, etched in blood and shame, remind us of the cost of purity in a world that feared women's strength. As we journey deeper into this history, we'll uncover the women who faced these trials, some who triumphed, others who fell. From Joan's defiance to Catherine's tragedy, their lives reveal the deadly price of proving purity. Join us as we unravel this tapestry of courage and cruelty, where the quest for chastity became a sentence of death. You stand in the bustling courtyard of Chinon Castle, 1429, where the air hums with the clamour of soldiers and the scent of damp earth after a spring rain. The stone walls, weathered by war, loom like silent judges, their shadows stretching across a young woman who commands the crowd's gaze. She is Joan of Arc, barely 17. Her cropped hair and boy's tunic a stark contrast to the finery of the French court. Her eyes, fierce with conviction, burn like embers, her voice carrying the weight of divine visions. Yet whispers ripple through the onlookers, nobles, priests and courtiers, questioning her purity, her right to lead. In a nearby chamber, matrons and clerics prepare to examine her, their task to confirm her virginity, the key to her claim as God's chosen warrior. You clutch your cloak, heart racing, as the weight of this moment settles. For Joan, proving purity is no mere ritual but a shield against suspicion, a test that will propel her to glory or cast her into flames. In the chaos of the 100 Years' War, France is a fractured land, torn between English invaders and a weak dauphin, Charles VII. Jeanne, a peasant girl from Domremy, arrives at Chinon claiming divine visions from Saint Michael and Saint Catherine, urging her to save France. Her boldness, leading armies, wearing men's armour, shocks the court. But it's her virginity that becomes her currency. In medieval Europe, a woman's chastity is tied to divine favour, and Joan's claim to be la pucelle, the maiden, is central to her mission. You imagine her standing before Charles, her voice steady. God has sent me, a virgin, to crown you king. But the court, steeped in suspicion, demands proof. Her purity must be verified, not just to affirm her holiness but to dispel fears of witchcraft or demonic influence. The test is both a necessity and a trap, her body a battleground for France's salvation. The examination, conducted by noblewomen like the Queen of Sicily and clerics, is a private ordeal shrouded in secrecy. You envision Joan in a candlelit chamber, her breath shallow as matrons probe her body, their faces stern, searching for the hymen, a flawed symbol of chastity. Chronicles, like those of Jean d'Aulon, note the verdict. She is a true virgin, untouched. The matron's words, though clinical, carry divine weight, affirming Joan's visions as godly, not demonic. You feel her relief, a fleeting warmth in the cold stone room, but also her resolve. I am God's servant, she might have whispered, her hands clasped in prayer. Yet the test is humiliating, a reminder that even a warrior must bow to the court's obsession with her body. Her purity, once a shield, becomes a chain, tying her to a role she cannot escape. Joan's virginity is more than a personal virtue, it's a political weapon. You see her riding into Orléans, April 1429, her white banner emblazoned with lilies, her armour gleaming as crowds cheer, La Pucelle. Her chastity, confirmed by the test, elevates her to a saint-like figure, a symbol of France's redemption. Chroniclers record her victories. Orléans liberated, Charles crowned at Reims. But her purity is a double-edged sword. It grants her authority in a man's world, yet it makes her a target. You hear the whispers among English and Burgundian foes. A virgin, or a witch. Her success threatens their power, and her chastity becomes a point of attack, a way to undermine her divine claim. In a world that fears women who defy norms, Joan's virginity is both her strength and her vulnerability. The psychological toll of these tests is immense. You imagine Joan alone in her tent, the night before a battle, her armour cast aside, her thoughts racing. They look at me as if I'm not human, she might have confided to a trusted companion, her voice trembling with the weight of scrutiny. The test, though passed, leaves scars. Her body, once her own, is now a public artifact, judged by priests and nobles. Her faith sustains her, but the constant need to prove her purity erodes her spirit. You feel her isolation, a girl of 17 bearing the hopes of a nation, her chastity a burden heavier than her armour. The court's obsession with her virginity reflects a deeper fear. A woman who leads men must be flawless, or she risks being branded a heretic. The test's consequences unfold with devastating clarity. By 1430, Joan is captured by the Burgundians at Compiègne, sold to the English, and brought to Rouen for trial. You stand in the crowded courtroom, January 1431, the air thick with incense and hostility. The English, desperate to discredit her, revive the question of her virginity. Bishops and inquisitors, led by Pierre Cauchon, probe her life, accusing her of witchcraft and immorality. A second examination is ordered, as recorded in trial transcripts. Matrons again confirm her virginity, hoping to prove her visions false. You see Joan, defiant yet weary, enduring the invasion, her eyes fixed on a crucifix. "My voices are from God," she declares, her voice cutting through the murmurs. But the test meant to vindicate her becomes a trap. Her purity is acknowledged, yet her defiance seals her fate. The trial shifts focus to her cross-dressing and visions, but her virginity remains a weapon. The English, unable to disprove her chastity, twist it against her. A virgin who fights like a man must be unnatural. A witch. You hear the judge's accusations. Her purity is a lie, a devil's trick. The psychological torment is relentless. Joan, once France's saviour, is now a prisoner, her body and soul dissected by men who fear her power. You imagine her in her cell, the chains clinking, her prayers a whisper. God, let them see the truth. But truth is no match for politics. On May 30th, 1431, she is burned at the stake, her cries rising with the flames. Her virginity, a symbol of her divine mission, unable to save her. The spices of Joan's story lie in its human drama. You envision her facing the matrons, her heart pounding as she submits to their touch, knowing her visions hang in the balance. "I am God's maiden," she might have whispered, her voice a mix of fear and faith. Her trial, as chroniclers describe, is a spectacle. Crowds gathering to see the virgin warrior condemned. Her final moments, calling for a cross as flames consume her, are a testament to her courage, a spark that ignites France's resistance. These imagined moments, grounded in historical accounts, make her story a mirror for the cost of purity, a girl's body turned into a battlefield for faith and power. Joan's death is not the end, but a beginning, her legacy shaping France's fight and later canonization in 1920. You stand in the ashes of Rouen, the crowd's silence deafening, and feel the weight of her sacrifice. Her virginity tests, meant to affirm her holiness, became a prelude to her martyrdom, a reminder that purity could be a death sentence. As we move forward, we'll see this pattern repeat. Women like Catherine Howard, whose alleged impurity led to her execution, trapped by the same obsession that consumed Joan. The flames of Rouen fade, but their heat lingers, a warning of the deadly price of proving purity in a world that fears women's strength. You stand in the opulent yet suffocating halls of Hampton Court, 1541, where the air is thick with the scent of polished oak and the venom of whispered betrayals. The torchlight flickers on tapestries depicting saints, their eyes seeming to judge the young woman who hurries past. Her laughter now silenced. She is Catherine Howard, barely 20, the fifth wife of King Henry VIII. Her rose-pink gown a fragile shield against the court's predatory gaze. Her dark eyes, once sparkling with mischief, now dart nervously, sensing the shadows closing in. In a nearby chamber, courtiers and clerics pore over letters, their murmurs weaving a web of accusations that will ensnare her. Her past, her body, her very purity are under scrutiny, a test of chastity that will prove not just her worth, but her survival. You clutch your cloak, heart pounding, as the weight of Tudor treachery descends, turning a queen's youthful indiscretions into a death sentence. Catherine, a cousin of Anne Boleyn, is no stranger to the court's dangers, yet her youth and vivacity make her a fleeting star in Henry's orbit. Married to the king in July 1540, at perhaps 19, she's a breath of spring to his aging autumn, his once golden hair now grey, his body plagued by ulcers. You see her at a banquet, her laughter ringing like bells, her dance steps light as she charms the king. But her past, a tapestry of flirtations and youthful folly, lurks like a spectre. Raised in the lax household of the Dowager Duchess of Norfolk, Catherine's teenage years were marked by dalliances with her music teacher, Henry Manox, and later Francis Derham, a secretary who claimed a pre-contract of marriage. These were not secrets but open gossip among servants, yet they were buried when she caught Henry's eye. Now, as queen, her purity is expected to be absolute, her body a vessel for the king's hoped-for heir. The scrutiny begins with whispers, as it always does in the Tudor court. You hear courtiers mutter in the corridors. She's too free with her smiles, too bold with the gentlemen. By late 1541, Thomas Cranmer, Archbishop of Canterbury, receives reports from a former servant, John Lascelles, whose sister knew Catherine's past. The allegations are explosive. Catherine was no virgin when she married Henry. Her liaisons with Manox and Derham proof of her impurity. You imagine Cranmer, his face grim, presenting the evidence to Henry, whose love turns to rage. "She has deceived me," he might have roared. his voice shaking the privy chamber, his pride wounded more than his heart. Unlike Joan of Arc, whose virginity was tested to affirm her divine mission, Catherine faces no formal physical examination. Her past is her trial, her body judged by words and memories rather than matron's hands. The investigation, led by Cranmer and the Privy Council, is a relentless dissection of Catherine's youth. You see her summoned to a private chamber, November 1541, her hands trembling as she faces interrogators. "Did you lie with Derham?" they demand, their voices cold as the stone walls. Catherine, her wit dulled by fear, admits to affection, but denies a formal betrothal, her words stumbling as she tries to protect herself. You envision her alone that night, her breath misting in the candlelight, whispering prayers. "God, let him forgive me." But Henry, obsessed with his image as a cuckolded king, sees her past as treason. The court's obsession with virginity, though not a physical test in Catherine's case, manifests in the assumption that her premarital dalliances betray the king's honour, her body a public property defiled. The psychological toll is crushing. Catherine, once carefree, now lives in a cage of suspicion. You imagine her pacing her apartments, her gown trailing like a shroud, haunted by memories of Derham's kisses in the Duchess's household. "I was young, reckless," she might have confided to her lady-in-waiting Jane Rochford, her voice breaking. "I thought it passed." But in the Tudor court, the past is never buried. Jane, herself entangled in the Boleyn scandal, betrays Catherine, revealing rumours of a new affair with Thomas Culpeper, a courtier. Though evidence of adultery is thin, meetings, letters, no proof of consummation, the court spins a narrative of depravity. You feel her despair, her youth no shield against a king who demands perfection, her body a canvas for his rage and the court's vengeance. The accusations escalate, each one a nail in Catherine's coffin. You stand in the shadows as Derham and Culpeper are arrested, December 1541, their interrogations brutal. Derham admits to a past pre-contract, but denies recent crimes. Culpeper, tortured, confesses to intent but not action. Their words, true or coerced, damn Catherine. The charge of adultery, compounded by her alleged impurity before marriage, is deemed treason under a new law of 1534, which equates a queen's infidelity with plotting the king's death. You hear the council's verdict: she is no true wife. Catherine's fate is sealed, not by a physical virginity test, but by a court that equates her past with betrayal. You imagine her in her chambers, her face pale, whispering to herself, "I loved him, but not like this." Her youth, her charm, her very vitality become her undoing. The trial, a formality, takes place in January 1542. You see Catherine confined to Sion Abbey, her spirit fraying as she awaits judgment. The Bill of Attainder, passed without a formal hearing, declares her guilty of treason and unchastity. You envision her reading the decree, her hands shaking, the words blurring through tears. On February 10, 1542, she is moved to the Tower of London, the same fortress that claimed her cousin Anne. You stand by the Thames, the water grey and cold as her barge glides past, her figure small but resolute. Her execution, on February 13th, is swift. A single stroke of the axe, as recorded in chronicles. You imagine her final moments on Tower Green, her voice steady. "I die a queen, but I ask God's mercy." Her blood stains the straw, a girl of 20 sacrificed to a king's wounded pride. The spices of Catherine's story lie in its tragic irony. You envision her laughing with Culpeper, innocent flirtations twisted into treason, her youth a crime in a court that demanded purity. Her final letter to Henry, possibly imagined, pleads, "I was but a girl, my lord. Forgive me." The crowd at her execution, as chroniclers note, weeps for her, a stark contrast to Anne's mixed reception. Her story, grounded in letters and trial records, is a mirror for the Tudor obsession with chastity, where a woman's past could condemn her as surely as a failed test. You feel the weight of her loss, a vibrant soul crushed by a system that saw women as vessels of honour, not humanity. Catherine's death is a grim echo of earlier tragedies, like Joan of Arc's, where purity tests, physical or reputational, became death sentences. You stand in the tower's silence, the air heavy with her ghost, and see the pattern. A woman's body, judged by men, becomes a weapon against her. As we move forward, we'll explore how these rituals persisted across cultures and into modern times. Their legacy, a warning of the deadly cost of proving purity. Join us as we unravel these stories of courage and cruelty, where chastity became a chain that bound women to their doom. You stand in the humid glow of a Mughal palace, 16th century India, where the air is thick with the scent of sandalwood and the murmur of silk-clad courtiers. Before you, a young princess, her henna'd hands trembling, awaits a ritual to prove her purity for a royal marriage. Her eyes, veiled by a lattice screen, betray a storm of fear and resolve as matrons prepare to inspect her, their verdict a seal on her fate. This is no European court, yet the weight of virginity is just as crushing, a universal chain binding women across cultures. You clutch your robe, heart thudding, as the shadows of ancient traditions stretch from India to Africa, Asia to the Americas, each society weaving its own deadly tapestry of purity. In the Mughal Empire, virginity was a cornerstone of dynastic honor, as seen in chronicles like the Akbarnama. Princesses, destined for strategic marriages, faced scrutiny by female elders, though physical tests were less documented than symbolic rituals, like presenting unblemished garments. Failure could mean disgrace or banishment. Her body a bargaining chip for alliances. You imagine a princess whispering to her confidant, "Will they find me worthy?" Her voice lost in the palace's echo. In ancient China, imperial concubines underwent examinations to ensure they were unblemished for the emperor, as recorded in Han Dynasty texts. You envision a young woman, her face pale, enduring the touch of court physicians, her purity tied to cosmic harmony. Failure could mean execution, her life a footnote in the emperor's quest for divine favor. Across Africa, virginity rituals varied but carried similar weight. In the Zulu kingdom, 19th century records describe the Ukuhlolwa Kwezintombi, a public ceremony where young women were inspected to confirm chastity before marriage. You see a girl, her beads glinting in the sun, standing before elders, her heart pounding as the crowd watches. Failure meant shame for her family, sometimes violence. In pre-colonial Mesoamerica, Aztec noblewomen faced rituals to prove purity for sacred roles. As codices suggest, their bodies offered to gods like Xochiquetzal. You feel their fear, their resilience, as they navigate a world where chastity was a currency, their lives hanging on a ritual's whim. These practices, though diverse, echo Europe's obsession. A woman's body was not her own, but a vessel for honor, power, and divine will. The psychological toll was universal. You imagine a Mughal princess, her chamber lit by oil lamps, whispering, "I am more than this test," her voice breaking under the weight of expectation. Across cultures, women face the same dread, their worth reduced to a single, flawed measure. The rituals, whether physical examinations or symbolic displays, were less about truth and control, reinforcing patriarchal systems that feared female autonomy. You hear the elders' verdicts, from Delhi to Tenochtitlan. Pure or tainted, words that could crown or condemn. These stories, grounded in historical records, are spiced with human drama, their pain a mirror for the global struggle against judgment. You step into the flickering light of a 20th century courtroom, 1920s Egypt, where the air hums with the clatter of typewriters and the tension of a changing world. A young woman, her face veiled but her eyes defiant, faces a council of elders, her purity questioned in a betrothal dispute. The practice of virginity testing, though fading in Europe, lingers in parts of the Middle East, Asia, and Africa, a ghost of ancient mandates. You feel the chill of continuity, the weight of traditions that refuse to die, as women's bodies remain battlegrounds for honor and control. In colonial India, British records note virginity tests among princely states, where brides were examined to ensure dynastic purity, often under Western scrutiny that mocked yet perpetuated the practice. You envision a princess, her sari trembling, enduring a ritual that blends Mughal tradition with colonial judgment. In 20th century South Africa, Zulu virginity testing persisted, as anthropologists like Suzanne Leclerc Madlala document, with girls inspected publicly, to uphold community values. You see a teenager, her breath shallow, standing before a crowd, her future tied to an elder's nod. Failure could mean ostracism, her family's honor shattered. Even in modern Egypt, as late as the 2011 Arab Spring, reports surfaced of virginity tests on female protesters, a tool of state control, sparking global outrage. The psychological impact remains devastating. You imagine a young woman in 1970s India, her heart racing as she faces a test, whispering to herself, "I am enough." The fear of shame, of losing marriage prospects or social standing, echoes medieval terrors. These tests, often justified as cultural tradition, were rooted in the same patriarchal fears that haunted Joan of Arc or Catherine Howard. A woman's autonomy threatened male power. Modern human rights reports, like those from Amnesty International, condemn these practices as violations, yet they persist in pockets, fueled by myths of purity. The spice lies in the irony. As societies modernized, the ancient obsession with chastity endured, chaining women to outdated ideals. Segment 8. Echoes of Injustice. Legacy and Lessons from Purity's Price. You stand in the quiet of a modern archive, 2025, surrounded by manuscripts and digital screens, the air humming with the weight of history's lessons. The stories of virginity tests, from Mesopotamian priestesses to Catherine Howard, form a tapestry of courage and cruelty, their threads woven through centuries. You see Joan of Arc's flames, Catherine's scaffold, the trembling hands of countless women judged by their bodies. Their legacy is not just tragedy, but a warning. The obsession with purity has always been about control, not truth. The impact of these rituals lingers. Elizabeth I, Catherine's stepdaughter, rose above her mother's scandal to redefine queenship, her virginity a political tool she wielded, not endured. You imagine her, red hair gleaming, refusing marriage to maintain her power, a subtle rebuke to the tests that felled her kin. Modern movements, from Me Too to global women's rights campaigns, echo this defiance, challenging systems that judge women by their bodies. Yet the past's shadows remain, in cultural practices, in lingering stigmas, in the fear that a woman's worth is tied to her chastity. You feel the weight of their courage, their pain, a reminder that history is not just a record, but a call to action. You step back from the archive, the manuscripts fading into the glow of memory, and stand on a windswept hill, the ghosts of these women around you. From the Naditu of Babylon to Joan's pyre, from Catherine's scaffold to the modern clinic, the quest for purity has been a chain, binding women to the will of gods, kings, and societies. You imagine their voices, a chorus across time. We were more than our bodies. Their stories, Joan's faith, Catherine's youth, the unnamed princesses of distant courts, are a testament to resilience. Their lives a mirror for our own struggles against judgment. What if Joan had been spared? What if Catherine had been believed? These questions linger, unanswered, urging us to challenge the systems that demand perfection from women. The virginity test, whether a matron's touch or a court's accusation, was never about truth but power, a weapon to silence and control. You feel their presence, their defiance, as you turn from the hill, the wind carrying their names. Let us honor them by questioning the chains of the past, by amplifying the voices that history tried to silence. Join us as we uncover more forgotten stories, where courage burns brighter than